This episode of Hand to Hold's NICU Now podcast is sponsored by Huggies. Huggies diapers and wipes are inspired by parents' hugs. The new No Baby Unhugged program ensures babies, even the tiniest ones, get the hugs they need. By helping parents and healthcare professionals through their products, new Huggies programs in hospitals, expert resources to foster healthy skin and development, and continued diaper and wipes donations. For more information, visit huggies.com/nobabyunhugged. Hello, my name is Kelly. Welcome to the NICU Now audio support series. I am a NICU parent to Jackson, a micro-preemie born at 24 weeks, and Lauren, a late-term preemie born at 34 weeks. I am also the founder and executive director of Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit dedicated to providing education, resources, and peer-to-peer support to families that have experienced premature birth, the loss of a baby, or have a child with a special healthcare need. Hand to Hold's NICU Now audio support series was developed to help NICU parents navigate their NICU journey. I was told it was important to bond with my baby, but I did not know how to bond with a child I couldn't feed, hold, or bathe. One that weighed a little more than a pound and was clinging to life on a respirator. I was so scared to touch him because I knew how fragile his skin was. I was told not to speak to him in a voice above a whisper for fear of overstimulation. I honestly felt like a bull in a china shop, more like a bystander than his mother. When my son was about a week old, a very patient and wise NICU nurse encouraged me to change my son's diaper for the first time. I will never forget how my hand shook as we maneuvered wires to delicately dab his tiny bottom with a cotton ball. I have no doubt she could have completed the task in less than a minute, but she took the extra 10 minutes to help me have that important bonding experience with my son. It was the first time I truly took part in his daily care, and in many ways, it was our first bonding experience, the hug I had been waiting for. When a full-term healthy baby is born, parent interaction with the baby is almost immediate, including holding, feeding, and soothing. But the NICU presents monumental barriers to an emotional connection with the baby. This disruption in the bonding process is associated with feelings of grief, loss, and maternal helplessness. It is also associated with the elevated risk for anxiety disorders, including post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. A strong, positive, healthy bond between parent and child is critical to optimal development of the child's emotional, intellectual, and physical well-being. It is also critical for parents' mental health. Studies have found that strengthening the parent-child bond could result in more competent parenting over the child's life. We know now that kangaroo care is an essential part of the bonding process for both mom and dad. It helps increase the baby's weight gain and mother's sense of competence. Kangaroo care also helps your baby regulate their breathing, keeps them warm, helps them learn muscle control, and teaches them to be calm. It can also help mom increase milk production. Even if your baby is not yet breastfeeding, you can still hold them skin to skin while they are taking their feedings. Bonding is a process that takes time and is not an instantaneous action. It begins when you become pregnant and continues throughout your relationship with your child. While the NICU presents many barriers to the normal bonding process, there are still many ways we can facilitate the bonding process with our medically fragile child while in the NICU. To help us understand and process some of the emotions that may keep us from bonding with our medically fragile child, I would like to welcome Kara Wallen. As a licensed marriage and family therapist, as well as a parent who has experienced preterm birth and loss, Kara understands the challenges of a NICU journey on a personal and professional level. Welcome, Kara.
Hi, Kelly. How's it going?
Kara, I know that parents who are struggling with postpartum depression may find it harder to visit their baby in the NICU and to feel bonded and attached. I know when we were there were a lot of bedsides that had no parents there. How can we begin to process our emotions so that we can not only show up in the NICU, but work to bond with our baby?
I think that's a really good question. And even before going into the realm of something like a diagnosis in terms of depression, I think it's reasonable to look at the NICU experience as completely disempowering for parents. For parents of typical full-term babies, to be able to even fathom the idea that your baby is immediately taken away from you, attached to all of these different wires and tubings, and you're basically in a circumstance that many parents, thankfully, never have to go through. But it takes away all of your basic intuitive ideas about how to attach or bond with your baby. So it can be very challenging, especially in the beginning, when you're scared of knocking pieces of the equipment or doing something that could cause harm to the infant. My thought about it is that in bonding, we're able to build our strengths bit by bit. And as you said, it's not only good for the baby, it's also good for us and in bolstering our mental health and going through the whole experience. So in striving to make this attachment with your babies, you can actually do a lot of preventative work for both the mental health of both parents as well as for the developmental health of the baby. So it's something that's really important to practice and can have a lot of surprising benefits that last for a very long time.
Well, in our support groups, something that we often talk about is helping the parent really understand what do they appreciate about the baby, helping them really talk about the baby and normalize some of the things that maybe they haven't already normalized. Like even the fact that they are a parent now, they are a mother, even though the baby is very tiny and very sick and they may not be holding the baby yet, but just kind of having them talk about the baby and what's unique about their baby. Have you had that experience as well?
Sure, absolutely. It's something that can be very valuable in terms of being able to establish this, and also just to remember that attachment is basically a process that takes place over the course of a child's lifetime. So when you start in the NICU, it can feel very altered, it can feel very unnatural, but in reality, you're doing the very same thing that parents of full-term babies are doing. And it's not a process that's very simple. I think a lot of the times the way our culture treats it, it's as if parenting is something that sort of naturally falls upon parents in the very early stages of infancy, when in reality it's a very give and take process that builds slowly and over time and over the different little leaps that the infants make as they get older and have more reactivity to the way that we interact with them. So the fact that it takes practice and it takes more of sort of an effort to be able to make these attachments, to me indicates that the parents are actually putting it's a discrete effort into it that makes it almost stronger to a certain extent, because there's that much of an idea behind it, an effort behind it, and an intention to be able to build that bond, which makes being a NICU parent really unique in a sense.
Well, I know that we're doing a better job now encouraging the parents to hold the baby earlier. So
Sure.
as soon as it's medically feasible for them to hold, we're now practicing kangaroo care, because we know that that can lead to shorter NICU stays and improve weight gain, higher rates of breastfeeding, and lower the mom's stress level. So we know how important that is. But I didn't get to hold Jackson for 6 weeks. And so really finding ways that we can bond with them without holding them. And, I talked in the intro about being told not to speak above a whisper, but, still sitting there and talking softly and singing to my baby was so important. And just being there and looking at them and gazing at them, interacting with him. I think it was really important when the nurses pointed out little things about him to really normalize him to me, because it was hard to see him with all the tubes and the wires and the tape and, to even, some of the normal things that we usually do if it's a full-term healthy baby. We say, oh, he's got my eyes, or he's got his granddad's nose, or, he has daddy's fingers. But with our babies, it's really hard to pick those things out. So I think it was really important for me. I remember when the nurses nicknamed him Action Jackson, and that stuck, and we've carried that through all of his lifetime of that nickname. But that just began to help me feel more bonded to him and feel like his mom, to take care of him. Finding ways to be integrated into his care. I talked about that first diaper change. I mean, it was such an emotional experience. And I have a video that my husband took that day, and you see my hand shaking and trembling and tears in my eyes of, just the thought you you take it for granted that you're going to change your baby's diaper. But at this point, Jackson's a week old, and I'm finally getting to touch him in this what should be very simple way. But it was a hard process when it's a 1 pound baby, right? And like you talked about, we're so scared of hurting them and touching them. But that began to lessen my fear as I had more interaction with him. So I think it's just so important that parents seek out those opportunities and not be afraid of them, and really ask the nurses and the doctors, how can I be involved in my baby's care? And I just think being there. But I also think it's really important that we realize and understand that often moms are recovering from a very traumatic birth experience. I had an emergency C-section. Our bodies are recovering. And for us to automatically be put into a NICU situation where we're supposed to be, just standing at my baby's bedside was hard, right? Because physically I was still recovering. So I think it's really important for us to validate the fact that mom needs to take care of herself before she can take care of the baby.
So I talk a lot about on my website and in different writing that I've done about trauma-informed care. And it's basically I focus on service providers, therapists, nurses, and doctors who are working with NICU parents who have recently been through an acute traumatic event. So basically what I like to talk about is that it's important for the community to be aware when someone is going through a traumatic circumstance, they're not necessarily going to be operating on all levels that you're accustomed to them operating on. So it's very important to provide that containment and safety and encouragement so that people can feel empowered to find their voice and find their method of attachment with their baby. At first, it may feel really disorienting and it may feel very uncomfortable. I know for myself, I didn't thankfully have to have a C-section, but due to the fact that William passed at 6 days old, the idea of touching Elliot was in some ways very terrifying for me because I was afraid that I would give him an infection. There were all these mysterious things sort of hovering over the NICU as to whether or not I could actually cause Elliot harm. And at that point, I was absolutely terrified. But when one of our amazing primary nurses had me hold Elliot skin to skin. I think he was about a week and a half old. And she did this very deliberate thing where she held a mirror in front of us and they put him on my chest. And I could see that he had it was more of a visceral reaction than an intentional one, but he had the biggest smile as soon as he touched my skin. And it was just sort of like,
wow.
It was amazing. And
what a great idea. I've never heard of a nurse putting a mirror up. I think that's
awesome.
Such a great idea. I think parents should ask for that.
Yes. It was incredible because the positive reinforcement for me to see that for Elliot, it was soothing to him to be able to feel my skin and to hear my voice. That in and of itself made me have the bravery to be able to do it again, to try and facilitate other ways of contact. But when I talk about trauma-informed care, something like that, it just highlights the importance too of that relationship that you have with the service providers, nurses, doctors, and their encouragement, because sometimes as a mother or a father, you're bewildered. And obviously, most of us, thankfully, again, have not had this kind of interaction with a hospital institutional environment ever before in our lives. So we don't know what's safe, what's protocol, what we should or should not be doing. So it takes a lot of encouragement. And it can be easy when you work in that kind of an environment where it's just very high-level stress, all kinds of stuff going on, juggling 1,000 different things at once. You get used to it, and you can sometimes assume that people know what to do, when in reality it's a big learning curve for everybody, and especially when you have a very early gestational age baby that's struggling.
Well, the nurse's role is just so crucial. I know just their facial expressions. I mean, we feed off of every look and every expression, and them making us feel welcome.
Sure.
I mentioned earlier, I felt more like a bystander than the mother, and I think it's normal to even feel a little jealousy of the nurses that are interacting and doing a role that you think you should be doing, right? And a lot of guilt there that you can't.
Right.
So, for the nurses to understand how important it is for us to feel like the mom and the dad to have a role too. We talk often about kind of the dads get excluded a lot. We don't. We talk more about what the mom's needs are than we do the dads, but the dads need to bond as well. I think it's so crucial that start early. Just recently talking with a nurse who said that the father would not come past the entry. He just could not even step into the NICU, and how she held his hand and placed his hand on the baby and showed him how to love that baby and be integrated into the care. So I think
that's incredible.
Really important for us to encourage those dads to be involved as well. I know every relationship is different, and sometimes the mom bonds first, and sometimes the dads do. A lot depends on if the mom's able to go to the NICU right away. Why are we not at the bedside? Where are the parents? And I think sometimes we forget that parents sometimes live a long way from the hospital. We don't always have transportation. I know I couldn't drive for 6 weeks or more after my C-section, so I was relying on someone to drive me back and forth. There are financial implications.
Yes.
I had to go back to work to keep our insurance. Some people have siblings at home that they are having to take care of. I mean, there's just so many factors. But then I think there is the underlying factor of just being scared, of not feeling that bond yet, not feeling like you have a role. I mean, if you don't feel like you have a role and you're integrated into the care and all you're going to do is sit there and stare at your baby, it's harder to come in.
Yes.
So I think that's why it's just so important to know how important your voice is to the baby, your presence is to the baby, for you to start breaking down those barriers to be involved in their care.
And I think you brought up a really important point, that sometimes we can think that the idea of something as minimal as the sound of our voice, it seems small, as if it can't really make that big of a difference. And that reminded me of another part of my personal story, which was when Elliot was under the bilirubin lights, which felt like it was 5,000 years, but it was probably 3 days. So they were really kind to us, and they would try to coordinate those 2 hours off when we were there. And I remember one time they took off his little, sunnies, and I said, "Elliot," and he opened his eyes. And, that was the first time I saw him open his eyes. This was within the first couple of days of his birth. And that was possibly one of the best moments of my entire life. And for him, too, he's in this over sensory stimulating world of craziness, and it's almost, with babies born that small, that premature, it's just nothing makes any sense. You don't even, it's just a cacophony of, I would imagine. So the fact that he could hear my voice amongst that and have that comfort that I was present with him, I'm sure had a really positive effect on his brain development, and also just an overall sense of safety. It's hard to say how that feels for an infant, let alone a preterm infant, but there's definitely an incredible amount of value in it. Voice, being able to do even just the holding, where you're doing the containing hold over their head and over their back, and just being able to sit there with them. All these things have an incredible value to them. Even just for us as parents, just being able to have that visual image of looking at them is valuable.
Well, because the topic we're talking about today is bonding with a medically fragile child, I think that it's just really important for us to emphasize that it's important for both parents to bond. And I know it was almost a competition for me and Mike for a while of who's going to get to hold at lunch and at dinner, and who's changing the diaper next, and those things. So I was very lucky that he really wanted to be very involved. So I think encouraging each other, if one is struggling, to encourage the other one to be as involved as possible. Well, thank you so much for helping us talk about these emotions, these really important pieces of learning to bond with our baby. I appreciate you being here and being a part of this very important audio support series.
Oh, thank you so much, Kelly. It's awesome to be here.
In closing, when parents are integrated into the care of their babies, studies show that babies have shorter hospital stays, improved weight gain, higher rates of breastfeeding, and moms have lower stress scores. If you are unable to hold your baby within the first 24 hours or even the first several weeks of life, please don't worry that your chance to bond with your baby is lost. Remember, bonding is a process. Visit often, make eye contact, use your voice by reading, singing, and speaking lovingly in soft tones. bring home to the hospital by bringing pieces of your life to place near your infant's isolette or crib, such as family photos and siblings' artwork. After 6 weeks, I finally held Jackson for the first time. For me, holding Jackson broke the emotional barrier I had built. It finally allowed me to believe he could survive and that I was capable of parenting a medically fragile child. When I finally held Jackson, I began to believe he would come home, and I knew that regardless of the challenges we would face them together as a family. I want to thank Kara for helping us understand and process our emotions associated with bonding with our medically fragile child. Bonding in the NICU is not easy, but it is crucial to not only the infant's health, but our own. In order for NICU babies to thrive after discharge, they need smart, informed parents who understand their needs and are emotionally and physically capable of caring for a medically fragile child. Peer-to-peer support is an effective tool for helping parents navigate their NICU stay. Support from a caring and informed NICU graduate parent helps a new family feel more capable, confident, and ready to face the journey ahead. To request support, volunteer, or donate, please visit our website at handtohold.org. Our quote to remember today is from Lao Tzu. Being deeply loved gives you strength. Loving deeply gives you courage. Thank you for listening. This episode of Hand to Hold's NICU Now podcast is sponsored by Huggies. Huggies diapers and wipes are inspired by parents' hugs. The new No Baby Unhug program ensures babies, even the tiniest ones, get the hugs they need by helping parents and healthcare professionals through their products, new Huggies programs in hospitals, expert resources to foster healthy skin and development, and continued diaper and wipes donations. For more information, visit huggies.com/NoBabyUnhugged.